Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shaelene and today we are doing another installment of Nonfiction Fridays. I have actually decided to rechange the name of the series. It was originally called 3 Nonfictions, which doesn't quite have the same ring to it as Nonfiction Fridays. I like that one better. Should have thought of this sooner before actually making the series, but that's life. So this is going to be the second installment in this series, hoping to get you guys more open to reading non-fiction books. So today I have 3 books to talk about, so let's just jump right on into the video. So the first book that I want to talk about is an ARC that I received from Hachette Books via NetGalley. This is Queen Meryl by Erin Carlson. This is a book about Meryl Streep, her life, her acting, and her iconic roles. I think everybody knows who Meryl Streep is. She's been in Mamma Mia, she's been in Kramer vs. Kramer, she's been in The Devil Wears Prada, she's done a lot of movies. She's had a lot of beloved roles and some really cult favorites, and she's pretty much the greatest living actress of our generation. Basically an icon playing icons. So in this book, thanks to the meticulous research done by the author and her team, we really get a behind the scenes look into Meryl's life and all the iconic roles she's taken up throughout her career. And we also get a look at her activism, which she has done many things for activism, and also her personal life. Man, I was really worried going into this book that it wasn't going to be something that would make me want to pick it up and read it the next time I sit down to read. I am definitely by no means a Meryl super fan. You know, I've seen a few of her movies. I've really enjoyed the ones that I've seen. There are a few of hers that I don't even like. But you know, she is just kind of one of those people that is very fascinating, so you know, I decided to take a shot and read this book, and I actually really enjoyed it. I'm pretty surprised because I'm not a person that consumes a lot of, you know, media concerning celebrities. Like, I just don't really read biographies, and I ended up really enjoying the book. I couldn't wait to sit down and read it and finish it and, like, you know, just read more of it. It was so interesting, and yeah, it was actually really good. The book is like really well written and incredibly well researched. Like, I can't even imagine the amount of time it must have taken just to do the research for this book alone, you know, gathering quotes from articles from like the 80s and, you know, interviews from like the 90s. Like, it's just crazy the amount of research was done for this book, and yeah, it ended up being really good and I really enjoyed it. There's also wonderful chapter illustrations at the beginning of each chapter, and it was, you know, it's so cool. It's a good book. If you're a fan of Meryl Streep or, you know, celebrity memoirs, I really recommend it. It was so enjoyable. So I gave this a 3.5 stars. Because of this book, I even went and watched some movies of hers that I haven't seen before that were like really interesting in the books. So the next book that I read was The Lost City of Z by David Grann. Explorer Percy Fawcett had a dream. He dreamed of finding a lost civilization in the Amazonian jungle, and this discovery would rewrite history in everything that Victorian people knew about the indigenous civilizations in the Amazon at that time. At this point in history, it was believed that the Indians of the Amazon were savages. They were incapable of complex societies. They were, you know, beneath them. They weren't civilized. They didn't have houses. They didn't have roads. They didn't have fields and crops and money and blah blah blah. Everything that you would think of civilized they didn't have, which, you know, with all the information we have today, we now know that a lot of those aren't true, and that in the Amazon there were some incredibly complex cultures in one of the most unhospitable places on Earth. So basically, Percy Fawcett set out to find these. He was previously a kind of surveyor slash map maker for the Geographical Society, I believe, and he mapped a lot of Brazil, which is how he kind of came up with this theory for the lost city of Z. He kind of found some ruins and some pottery shards and what looked like could be, you know, like the beginning of a civilization kind of thing. On his last fateful walk in the woods, if you will, he brought along his son and his son's best friend, and they go into the jungle to find this lost civilization, and they never return. Nobody knows what happens to them. There's many different theories. A lot of people have theorized that they starved to death, they were eaten by wild animals, that they died of disease, or that eventually the Indians got them and they ended up dying, being killed by them. So basically, in his wake, Percy Fawcett had a lot of explorers going in the jungle trying to find him, trying to locate him, trying to figure out what happened to him. And as a result of that, many people also died while trying to look for him. The truth is, we still don't know what happened to Percy Fawcett. And this book doesn't really bring you any closer to a concrete proof on what happened to him. A lot of this novel, we explore Percy Fawcett and his life, his stint in the army, his first taste of exploration, and the many geographical expeditions that he took to Brazil. And of course, we learn the attitudes that Victorians held during this time period towards, you know, Indian tribes in the Amazon, and the many different types of abuses that they were subjected to at the hands of colonizers in the Amazon. It was basically, you know, it's a slavery that we don't talk about. A lot of people talk about the slavery that, you know, happened in the United States, but there's a lot of slavery that happened to Native Americans that really isn't talked about, especially in South America. Like, I haven't heard anything on that, and I should really look into more of that. So Fawcett, he was a man built of pure ambition, dead set on finding Z. He prophesied that this here city, you know, was covered in gold. I mean, you've all heard the stories of like El Dorado and all that kind of stuff. It was like one of those things, and he was so dedicated to finding the lost city of Z that he went away from his family, you know, for years and years at a time. His wife would get pregnant, pop out a child, and he wouldn't see the child until the child was like 3 years old. So he was a very absent father to his children and his wife, and yeah, he risked a lot of his men in the process to finding the city, and it became a deadly obsession for him. And then it became an even more deadly obsession for other people who wanted to find what happened to Percy Fawcett, which even the own, you know, author of this book mentions. He was kind of consumed with the, you know, Percy Fawcett bug of trying to find him. And yeah, it's super interesting. This book is really filled with a very vivid and rich history of the time period and Percy, and just vivid descriptions of the Amazon. Nothing about this book is boring. It's very interesting. It keeps you really glued to the pages. I very much enjoyed my time reading this book. It was a real page turner. You learn so many things, and there's even another book called Exploration Fawcett, which is actually diary entries that Percy Fawcett made while he was on these expeditions. He kept a very detailed diary, which I am super interested in reading. One of his sons actually put together that and, you know, published it as a book after his death. So yeah, it was it's definitely something I'll be reading next when I get the chance to buy it. But yeah, this is such a good book. I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. I might actually make the rating higher for that. I don't know why I rate low sometimes, and then yeah, this is probably more of a 4 star for me, honestly. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, if you were interested in Victorian exploration, I really highly recommend this. It's really good, gives a really detailed account. So good. And the last book I have for you is actually a local history book, so unless you're local to the area, you might not be as interested about this book as I am. But I do encourage you to, you know, seek out local history books, learn local history, because, you know, it's actually quite interesting. So yeah, I actually received this book as an ARC from Nimbus Publishing via NetGalley. This is a local publisher here in Nova Scotia. So I read As British as the King, Lunenburg County during the First World War by Gerald Hallowell. So I actually live in Lunenburg County. I was born here, raised here. Lunenburg is actually a pretty famous town in Nova Scotia. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I'll put up some pictures of it. You may have seen it on the internet before, or Instagram or wherever. So yeah, it's a very historic place, has a lot of history. The Blue Nose, which is on our Canadian dime, was actually from that port. So this book delves into many important topics that occurred during the First World War in relation to my, you know, little county. I learned so many interesting tidbits of history that I did not know. To be honest, I don't know much about local history, or really even World War I or World War II history. I'm more of a ancient history kind of girl, but I do want to get more into those topics. So I did not realize how involved my little county was in relation to the war effort and how big of an influence they had in Nova Scotia and in, you know, Canada as a whole. Like, I found that super interesting because now we're just kind of this, you know, tiny little province with a dying industries. I learned a lot of things that I did not know. I did not know how instrumental women in Lunenburg County were to the suffragette movement. That movement, you know, led to the right to vote, and I believe, if my facts aren't wrong, we were one of the first to get women the vote in the country. Because, you know, the men weren't here to vote in the war and whatnot, and yeah, women took over a lot of labors. A lot of men, like farmers and fishermen, were exempt from going to war because, you know, they had to produce the food, they had to get the fish, and a lot of our food supplies were sent overseas to the men on the front. So yeah, it was just so interesting. So many things that I didn't realize were happening. Most terrifyingly were the accounts of German U-boats off the coast of Nova Scotia. They would sink schooners that were fishing, and the fishermen on the boats, they would put on the German U-boats and then set the fishermen into dories and they would row ashore. Yeah, it's just the thought that Germany really could have invaded at any moment. The amount of schooners sunk off our coast, it's just astounding. I actually heard stories growing up about German U-boats, like, you know, off the coast, and my dad has heard stories about, you know, eyewitnesses' accounts of German U-boats and whatnot. So, I mean, that was like pretty crazy to hear about. What was most amusing to me, and you're probably thinking, what could be funny about a book about war? Well, my little town hasn't changed in 100 years. There's and hilarious accounts about the hooliganism of my town and also the rum running. Honestly, not much has changed. I mean, if you're from a very, very small town with a population of less than 1,000 people, you totally know what I'm talking about, but like, yeah. I also didn't know that my little town has one of the oldest cenotaphs in Canada. It was actually erected, well, they believe it was erected before any other cenotaph in Canada and in Nova Scotia. It's definitely the oldest Nova Scotia, which I didn't know about. I thought that was quite amazing. So yeah, my little town was a troublemaker. This was very enjoyable, very entertaining, eye-opening and insightful. I definitely enjoyed my time reading this one. I gave it 5 stars. I will hopefully be picking up a hard copy of this book because it was so good. I really enjoyed it, and it makes me want to look more into my local history, and I hope that I've inspired you to look more into your local history as well, because it's so darn interesting. If you guys enjoyed this video, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I will have my Instagram, my Goodreads, and my Twitter linked in the description below. You can go ahead and follow me there, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!